Okay, so today we're going to do a deep dive into something pretty intense.
Yeah, this one's,
I'm excited.
yeah, a lot of people have been asking about this one.
Yeah, this is Soft White Underbelly,
Yes.
the YouTube channel. And you guys have sent over a ton of stuff, articles, think pieces,
All sorts of things.
comments from viewers, like just a lot to dig into here. So
It's gonna be good.
we're going to talk about, is this thing exploitative or is it raising awareness?
Right, is it poverty porn or is it something
It's like,
with, more noble intentions?
yeah, so that is the question.
Yeah, and that's something we're going to be thinking about as we go through all this stuff.
Yeah, so for anyone who's not familiar,
All right.
Soft White Underbelly is this YouTube channel run by a photographer named Laita.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially he interviews people who are marginalized people who are often forgotten by society.
Yeah, like people experiencing homelessness, drug addiction, sex work, that sort of thing.
And it's interesting because his background is in commercial photography.
Yeah, he's known for very stylized photographs.
Yeah.
Almost hyper-real, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Very polished.
Yeah, very polished. And then he's turning that lens on this underbelly of society.
Like a total juxtaposition
Exactly.
from his other work.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yes, that's kind of where that name comes from, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, and he films a lot of it on Skid Row.
Yeah.
And his interviews are very intimate, very raw.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes it so compelling, but also so controversial.
Totally.
Because it is so raw.
Yeah.
And there's a question of, is it exploitative to be showing people in these really vulnerable situations?
Exactly. And that's the big question, like poverty porn.
Right.
Is this just poverty porn or is this actually like empowering these people, giving them a voice?
Right.
So let's get into some of the themes that he explores in the channel.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones obviously is homelessness. And it's interesting because he doesn't just show, people who are currently homeless. He actually delves into their backstories and their histories.
Like, how did you get here?
Yeah, how did they end up in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the interviews that I found really powerful was with a woman named Lisa.
Okay.
And she talks about how she lost her apartment in a fire.
Oh, wow.
And she had no safety net. And she ended up on the streets.
Right.
And it just shows how precarious,
right.
Stability can be for so many people.
And one of the articles you sent pointed out something that I thought was really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It was talking about how these interviews actually highlight the systemic issues that contribute to homelessness.
Exactly.
Like the lack of affordable housing,
yeah,
the gaps in mental health services, all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's not just about individual choices or failings. It's about these larger forces
exactly
that are at play.
Yeah, so it's really forcing viewers to confront those bigger societal problems.
Absolutely.
Okay, so another big theme is addiction.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because he doesn't shy away from like the brutal reality of drug dependency.
He shows the physical toll, the desperation, the crime, the lost relationships.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
And he doesn't glamorize it at all.
No, not at all.
But what I find really interesting is that he actually asks about the root causes.
Yeah, that's a really important part.
Of the addiction.
Yeah, because he'll talk to people who have experienced, childhood trauma, chronic pain, poverty.
Right.
And it again kind of points to these deeper societal issues.
Like the things that lead to addiction.
Exactly.
Okay, so he also has done a lot of interviews with people who are involved in sex work.
Yeah, and I think this is another area where it gets really controversial because it is such a stigmatized topic.
Yeah, and we don't really hear from these people very often.
Right, it's kind of shrouded in secrecy.
Yeah.
And so he's giving a platform to these women to share their stories.
Right, and they talk about like the dangers that they face.
Yeah.
The lack of options, the exploitation that they experience.
Yeah, and the cycle of it.
Right.
How difficult it is to break out of.
But some people have criticized him for focusing primarily on women in these situations.
Yeah, I think that's a valid criticism.
Yeah.
Because it does kind of reinforce certain stereotypes.
Right, and it ignores the experiences of men who are involved in sex work.
Right, representation matters.
Yeah.
And it's important to consider who's being included and who's being left out in these conversations.
Okay, so another big theme is mental health and trauma.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the most powerful aspects of the channel.
I mean, we hear stories about abuse, neglect, PTSD, just like the invisible scars that people carry.
Right, and this is where the ethical debate gets even more complex.
Yeah, because on the one hand, you're giving a voice to people who are often silenced.
Right.
And you're humanizing them and you're challenging stereotypes.
And starting conversations about mental health, which are so important.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, some people argue that it's exploitative to be showing people in these very vulnerable states.
Right, and to be, profiting off of their trauma.
Right, and there's a question of whether these individuals are truly capable of informed consent.
Especially when they're facing such dire circumstances.
Seriously.
So it's a really complex issue.
It is.
And it's hard to know, where to draw the line.
Right.
One thing that I thought was really interesting is that he does often try to connect these personal stories to broader societal issues.
Yeah, he'll talk about systemic racism, economic inequality, the feelings of the criminal justice system.
All of these things that are contributing to the problems that these people are facing.
Yeah, he's not just presenting these stories in isolation.
Right.
He's trying to place them in a larger context.
Okay, so we've talked about the content, we've talked about the themes, we've talked about the criticisms, but does this channel actually make a difference?
Right, what's the impact?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to measure that directly, but it definitely generates discussion.
Oh, yeah. Millions of views, comments, shares.
Right. And some people argue that that in itself is raising awareness.
Right.
It's exposing a side of society that many people would rather ignore.
Totally.
And that can be a catalyst for change.
Yeah. And just getting people to even think about these issues.
Exactly.
But then there's the argument that it's just voyeurism.
Right.
That people are just consuming these stories for entertainment.
Yeah.
And not really engaging with them on a deeper level.
Right.
Not really feeling empathy or a desire to actually make a change.
So I guess that's the question that we leave you with.
Yeah.
Is soft white underbelly a powerful tool for social change?
Or does it cross an ethical line?
Is it exploitative? Is it empowering?
Right, there's no easy answer.
There's no easy answer.
But hopefully this deep dive has given you some things to think about.
Yeah, go check it out and decide for yourself.
Yeah.
And let us know what you think.
Oh.
Absolutely. All right, until next time. See ya.